What is the best you fucked with the wrong person moment you've seen? Story 1. In college, we attempted to pull a prank with our school's mascot at the other university down the river. It was thwarted when, in order to climb onto the statue of that university's founder, my friend in the mascot costume had to take the paws off. And then one of the paws was stolen by some of the crowd that was growing around us in our singing. Our school's unofficial song has a number of verses that are distinctly anti. This, particular, school, and we were singing them loudly. Anyway, the boys in our group went off to see if they could recover the paw, and my also female friend and I hung back with the remainder of the very large mascot costume, now in a giant duffel bag that took both of us to carry. Some of the kids from the rival school had been drinking and saw two women and figured they could take the rest of the costume from us with no real trouble. They told us this. I told them that wasn't a great idea, particularly because my 5'1" not particularly intimidating friend was trained in hand-to-hand combat. She really was. She was Marine Roddock. They either didn't believe me or didn't care and tried to just take the duffel bag. I stepped aside while she jumped between them and I couldn't exactly tell what was going on. But suddenly, one of the guys let out a high-pitched squeal and then yelled, "That was assault." And his buddy said, "Let's get out of here." Now, after they fled, she looked at me and said, "If you ever need to get a guy off of you, you grab his nuts, pull, and twist. Do they teach you that in the Marines?" I asked. "No," she said. "I have 3 brothers." Story 2. This happened to me my senior year of high school. My twin sister had just gotten dumped by her asshole gross boyfriend. I never liked him. He made her life miserable and was spreading rumors about her. She didn't want to have sex with him, so he dumped her. I was minding my own business walking through the packed cafeteria when he says, "There goes her slut of a sister," loud enough for those at nearby tables to hear. At this point, I had had enough of his bullshit towards my sister. And now he was dragging my name into the mud. "What did you call me?" I said. A literal hush falls over the cafeteria. The football team on the other side of the table stands up, ready to fight. I worked with one of them at Pizza Hut, so I knew they'd have my back. He says, "You heard me, slut." This part happens in slow motion in my memory. "That's what I thought you said." And I hit him with all the force I had across his greasy face. I left a handprint from his ear to his nose. The whole cafeteria gasps. He looks surprised at first, then embarrassed, then fuming mad. He looks for the nearest teacher. There's no way they didn't hear what happened. "Aren't you going to do anything?" he yelled across the room at them. "Nope," they said in unison. "Unless you want to go to the office with her for sexual harassment." Gotta love the female gym teacher. He never spoke a word about me or my sister again. I became a minor school celebrity for a while. The football team came over to check on me and offered to finish the job. It was a good day. Story 3. I was 15 in class. The teacher had left to get something, and it was one of the few classes I had taken effort to take notes in an orderly manner. I have very bad handwriting because I write fast, but this time I took the effort to do it slowly and carefully. So I grab a bottle of water from my backpack and start drinking from it. The guy sitting behind me reaches and hits the bottle with his finger just a little, enough so it'll flip out of my mouth. So my clothes are now wet and my notebook is wet too. I'm usually a quiet guy, short, and never pick up fights or stuff, but I do yell back. So I stand right by this guy's side. He's still sitting, and everyone is expecting me to start yelling or insulting him. He has this smug yell, "All you want." You'll still be wet grin in his face. So I grab his head and slam it into his desk, and then do it again, and then kicks his chair so he falls down, while the guy next to him starts telling me to calm down. Then I go back to my desk, sit, and cross my fingers like nothing happened. The teacher comes in, finds everyone staring at me. This guy with a red face and me silent. So he asks, what happened? Someone says Op slammed X's head on the table. Teacher looks at him, looks at me, and then says, well, I didn't see anything, so moving on. After class, the teacher calls me and asks if I really did do that. It's important to note I was, as I said, usually quiet and well-behaved, and this teacher likes and trusts me. So I tell him the truth. I did slam this guy's head into the desk and explain why. The teacher just stares at me and says, well, I didn't believe it because, you never pick up fights. Well, just don't do it again. I apologized to the guy after that, and he apologized to me. But damn, it did wonders. No one picked on me until my last year there, but that's another story. Story 4 was at a church camp in rural New England. There were a couple of kids who were from inner city Boston. Tried to come off as all gangsta, but it doesn't take a lot to be more badass than church kids from Connecticut. Anyway, these kids would come up to people and do a roast battle, although we call them burns, where they would make fun of someone. One of them would say something, usually a you mama joke because this was the early 90s, and his friends would go, oh, like it was the craziest thing they'd ever seen. Anyway, one day they came up to a kid and said, hey, let's do burns. This kid was pretty nerdy. Pasty white, not really fat, just doughy, like he never did anything physical. Thick glasses that sat a little crooked on his face. Picture Ted Wheeler from Stranger Things as a 14-year-old. Nerdy kid just says, okay, but you'll definitely lose. Not arrogant or intimidating, just casually stating a fact. Of course, now everyone is watching, and they couldn't let this slide, so they start going at it. Gangsta Kid starts with "Your mama's so fat," and his friends go nuts. Nerdy Kid hits back with something that's just devastating. Everyone watching is blown away and crack up laughing. Gangsta Kids get kind of defensive and try again. Nerdy Kid ends up ripping them all to shreds. Insults their clothes, their whole wannabe gangsta attitude, their Boston accents, and they weren't just accurate. They were hilarious. By the end, he had us rolling. Think he had been watching all week and coming up with them ahead of time. Because there was. Hesitating. No agitation. Just calmly but completely ruining them. It was so unexpected and magnificent. Story 5. I was at a party in college, out in the backyard with my roommates. This was a big house party right off campus that some friends we knew from the previous year in the dorms were throwing. It was a school year opener party. Sort of a last hurrah before classes started again. We had just arrived, hadn't even found the keg yet. We're just standing there, bullshitting with some people we hadn't seen all summer that we saw when we arrived. On the porch, maybe 10, 15 feet away from us were a smattering of people talking, and 2 people sitting in lawn chairs drinking, a guy and a girl. They were sitting close enough that I figured they were a couple when I first noticed them. However, the guy was visibly far more inebriated than the girl. I don't want to understate this in any way. So what I mean by that is that he was slouched, mouth open, sort of bobbing his head back and forth as though he was trying to figure out where he was. But someone had stolen his sense of spatial awareness and hit him over the head with a blackjack. Before making off with it, have you ever seen a recently low-bottomized person portrayed in a movie, Cuckoo's Nest style? That would have been a marked improvement. Anyway, no big deal. He seemed more or less fine. Just really out of it. I turned back to the conversation that interstedly semi-engaged in. I turned back to the porch moments later, and what I saw next happened in very rapid succession, and was over in an instant, and was maybe the most crotch-punchingly shocking and out of left field thing I had ever witnessed up to that point in my life. The girl, we'll call her Tina. That might actually be her name. We'll never know. Turns to the drunk. We'll call him Egbert. Probably not his name. Who has at some point in the 30 seconds I was turned away, casually vomited all up and down himself like he was tagging an overpass. And looks him up and down as you would if you were in her situation. Combining her abilities to both quickly size up a situation and state what it is plainly, Tina looks Egbert in his face and remarks the obvious. Dude, you threw up all over yourself. Somehow, in an act of utter defiance of his current condition, Eggy backhanded Tina with what I can only describe as the speed and accuracy of a striking cobra. Though he wasn't even facing her exact direction, and he almost certainly had to be seeing in triplicate at this point, his aim was true. And he stupid meatpaw struck Tina square in the face with a brutality that knocked her out of her lawn chair, which collapsed like that Sports All-Team U. Hates defense. Right when it matters. Sorry, this is running long, and my similes are getting sloppy. Fortunately, a hero standing on the other side of Egbert who just witnessed the same shit. Parade just watched, let's call him Sir Payback, punches Bert in his idiot face. Hard, with Tina and Egbert now both on the ground and Egbert soundly subdued. Speb strides across the carnage of the porch and helps Tina up, checking if she's okay. She is, mostly. She's crying and doesn't understand why a stranger decided to attack her for pointing out that he puked all over himself and that, he might want to address that at some point. I was able to get a little info from our two heroes as I took them into the house to find the homeowners. Well, renters, but stop being a dick about it. To explain the situation and get them free drinks the rest of the night and make sure Tina had access to a bathroom or somewhere she could just get away from the crowd and collect herself and clean up for a minute in relative peace. Turns out, none of our three adventurers knew each other before this night. No couples, just three randos creating a story that the bards will sing about for the rest of time. Tina and Payback spent most of the rest of the night hanging out together. He seemed like a good enough fella, and I didn't never see him try any funny business. Not that they needed a chaperone, and I ended up imbibing the night away myself. I don't know much about what happened to Egbert. Last I heard, some friends of the people who threw the party made sure he wasn't going to die and laid him on his side in the yard and just sort of left him there. I guess I didn't see him after a while, so he must have stumbled off into the darkness like some kind barf. Soaked undead. Hopefully the shame of that night was difficult enough to wash off that he realized his alcohol limits were much lower than he had anticipated. Anyway, thus ends the cautionary tale of Egbert the Foul-Brained. If you skipped through the previous and found this entertaining, what's wrong with you? It was one of the single most fucked up things I've ever seen. Go to bed. Story 6. I was on the road with my grandpa. He was a truck driver, and we had stopped for the night at a truck stop. We go to do our normal thing of showering, eating, playing a game or two, then sleeping. If you don't know, truck stops have separate room showers. I got out of the shower and was waiting outside for my grandpa to finish his. I go look at the glass figurines that most stops have and wasn't but 5 feet from the showers. Next thing I know, a man grabs my arm and starts dragging me to the door. I was about 10 at the time, but I looked about 6, 7. Obviously, I don't know this man, and I start crying loudly, trying to grab onto something to stop him. Thankfully, my grandpa walked out at that moment and heard me screaming bloody murder. He ran, and I've never seen that man run before, to the guy dragging me, saying it's my daughter. I promise, don't worry. That man flew to the ground so fast and hard. My grandpa's hand was red. Blood sprayed when he was hit. The man looked up at him and yelled that I was his daughter. My grandpa said, "I'm the grandfather. Care to try again?" as he got closer. Cops came as my grandpa was straddling him and was about to beat him to a bloody pulp. Workers of the store backed up my grandpa, showed security footage. There were even bruises on my arms. If my grandpa had been in the showers another minute, who knows where I'd be or what would have happened to me. I love you, Grandpa. Story 7. I was out drinking in a street full of bars with some friends from high school. It was the kind of street they close to traffic on weekends and bars spill out onto the street. We were looking for a snack when we saw a commotion. A fight had broken out. One of those circles had opened up with a bunch of people watching. It was some guys from my school fighting a group from a rival school. One of the smaller guys gets glassed and falls to the ground, holding his face so his larger friend launched at the glasser with a rugby tackle. The larger guy then gets overwhelmed by 3 dudes and hits the ground with his head on the curb. He's still conscious, but someone doesn't like that, so he has his foot raised like he's about to stomp on this dude's head. People are screaming at him to stop at this point, but he doesn't listen because he's extra drunk. Angry. A woman from the crowd then pushed him so his foot misses. He gets mad and shoves back, then raises his foot again. Then the woman just launches at him. As people get her off him, I can hear what she's saying. "You don't fucking touch my little brother, you piece of shit." She was actually part of my group, but I didn't realize her brother was the guy on the ground and didn't see her torpedo through the crowd to help him. The crazy part of the story is that both siblings were models. The girl was freaky tall but pretty hot, so you wouldn't think she could fight. But she did a lot of swimsuit work, so she was crazy strong from weight training and martial arts to stay toned. She still looked pretty good after beating the dude, hair still perfect, makeup flawless, tiny dress intact. Only her hands were bloody. She was still lucky that even drunk teenage boys won't hit a girl because she wouldn't win against 5 dudes. The whole fight lasted about 20 seconds and police turned up a few minutes later. The glasser and the girl were arrested because of the state of her victim. He had a broken jaw, cheekbone, and was generally a bloody mess. But her family is crazy rich and influential, so she got away with a warning. There is also a theory that the cops were on her side for protecting her family. Anyway, my long story short is, don't mess with swimsuit models or their family. They are crazy strong and can fuck you up. Story 8. For 3 years, I was a corporate chef in a large office building. We had 5 co-workers and we all had to work together in a kitchen prepping for lunch. Our boss was from Australia and married a lesbian to get a green card. They had a small child. He was a terrible person that mentally and emotionally tortured us all day. We were forced to listen to his stupid stories and sex, and he would sexually harass the men and women to work. I guess his wife wouldn't have sex, and he took it out on us. I was his favorite target. He didn't pay my taxes on purpose, so I owed a huge amount of income tax. It wasn't uncommon for one of us to go to the bathroom and cry during work. If we made the smallest mistake, he would get inches from our face and scream at us until spit flew out on our face. So he gets a promotion to Midwest Manger over all the Midwest states. He is moving to Chicago from a small Ohio town. Company car and credit card and huge salary. He bragged how he finally made it. He handpicked who would take his place. We had made it through this terrible 3 years by going drinking on Friday nights and venting to each other about Dave, our boss. So we celebrated getting rid of him finally on Friday night. His last words to us was, "See you later, you motherfucking cunts." So we thought he was gone, but no. He handpicked out new boss and fucked with us through him. So I finally had enough and filed a grievance through her because we were all scared before, because he told us that he would make sure this was our last job if we ever complained about him. He was trying to get me fired through the new boss. So I took my 2-week paid vacation, found a labor lawyer, and filed a grievance with her. her flew someone from K2O to meet with me, made demands for my false write-ups to be off my record that Dave had done and a small raise I deserved. They wouldn't do it. So I put in my resignation, told my lawyer to file for hostile work environment and sexual harassment. Her then flew back to O, interviewed all the co-workers and found out I was telling the truth and more shit I forgot. Hey, investigated Dave and at a company picnic where awards were being handed out. They called Dave to the stage and in front of everyone fired his ass. He lost everything car salary promotion credit card in front of the whole company. Last I heard, he worked at a small country club down the street. The new boss he picked out got severely demoted and I was like being cheered by half the company for getting rid of him. His new coworkers had been complaining and hating him too. Got a $5,000 settlement and the company made nationwide changes because of what I did. So if you, Dave, should have never fucked with me, I hope you read this, Dave. Story 9. There was a family in my neighborhood that fostered a lot of Asian boys. One was in my class, a couple were older. They lived 3 houses down from my best friend and he became very close with the boy in our class. We can call him John. In retrospect, it seems obvious that while he was in our class, he was obviously older and was probably placed with us so he could catch up with his education. He was a great guy. When we were in a high school, a kid from the class ahead of us took a special interest in picking on my friend. He was constantly fucking with him, challenging my friend to fights, and finally showing up in our neighborhood. Eventually, he shows up one day and confronts my friend in the street. John witnessed this and comes out to challenge the bully, and utterly and completely destroys this kid, who had to 50 pounds heavier. He was one of those big red-headed kids, and the much smaller, much faster Asian kid beat the shit out of him before he knew what happened. It was watching a Bruce Lee movie live. Afterwards, my friend just walked up to me and said, "Well, I guess that's the end of my bully's name." Problem. It was. Another time, different kid was fostered by the same family, was getting picked on relentlessly by some upperclassmen. They were using racial slurs, running him off the road with their cars when he rode his bike around. Finally, he had enough one day at school and gets into with the ringleader of the bullies. Through broken English and a lot of Vietnamese swearing, he agrees to meet them at the only gas station in town after school to settle things. Kid shows up to confrontation and removes a glass bottle from his bag, promptly breaks it, and brandishes the jagged glass like a knife. Cue the bully immediately running to his car and taking off while the kid says that this is how you settle your honor in his country, or something to that effect. No one messed with him anymore after that incident. Story 10. Was on a Kentucky around Europe 6 years ago. When we got to Switzerland, we were staying in this campground with a bomb shelter for a bar. They had on-site security who are also a division of the police force. Can't remember exactly how that works. But we met a really nice security guard, Sven, who told us his nickname is White Tyson. What for short? It was party night and we were having a bloody good night when we noticed there was a bit of a scuffle on the floor. One guy, let's call him Hero, was the main antagonist. He had apparently slapped a girl on the dance floor who was refusing his advances, which quite a few of us took exception to. The girl he was trying it on with was the sister of one of the guys on our tour. After some push and shove, everyone was told the night was over and it was time to go to our rooms. I was told to keep an eye on Hero as he continued to work himself into a rage. Eventually, Hero lost the plot, started kicking and punching the wall in his room before deciding what was next. He walked up to Watt, who at this point was standing right outside his front door, started mouthing off with some threats. What decided enough was enough told him to back away, or he will use force to subdue him. Hero declined his offer and continued to advance towards him. Wood took a step back and threw back a few of his own. Hero's Kontiki was over that night. He lost 3 of his teeth and broke his jaw. We didn't see him again, but in the morning, when the girl's brother saw it, all he had to say was, "I did this for your sister. I hope you've learnt your lesson here."